If you've ever had a loved one get cancer and eventually die from it, you'll get the slow progress issue. On any given day, at least early on or midway through, there doesn't really seem to be any detectable change. In my mother's case, we used to joke that maybe the doctor got it wrong. He didn't. Using the analogy of a slow death process, almost imperceptible, we can look at the current state of affairs in the United States. We've collectively, overall, been in the process of a slow, prolonged death for almost 100 years now, really dating back to World War I with President Woodrow Wilson. His vision of America put in motion one crisis after another, including the Great Depression, which in its own right produced FDR and his New Deal, which stepped up the pace of the nation's impending doom. This has been going on for about a century now, the long march through all the nation's institutions aimed at changing the American culture, which to date has largely succeeded. Not completely, but largely. America was, or is, depending on your point of view, slipping away. You can see that by the fatherless children or broken families or whatever, which is sort of the bedrock of any civilization. On one side, you have the concerned relatives all too eager to pull the plug on grandma because they personally profit once she's stone cold in the ground. On the other side, you have the loved ones willing to try any remedy to reverse the decline. In America, that remedy has been Donald Trump. He appeared on the national political scene about a decade ago, and grandma is suddenly coming around, at least a little. The remedy, however, is really pissing off the other side, and they are pointing hard at all the side effects and blowing them all out of proportion. When someone is dying, preparations begin to be put in place. People begin to grow accustomed, in their head at least, to life without grandma, and most importantly, ordering their own lives for that eventuality. They put all that stuff in place. They imagine the future without grandma. I have to do this, I have to do that. And they start kind of living at least a little bit along the path as waiting for her to die. Well, that's what's happened on America's march to socialism. The commies aren't exactly wrong when they say America is already, practically speaking, a socialist nation, with all its government control drawn from the blood of the working class. The only thing secure, for example, about Social Security is that money will be taken from you, and you won't ever really see most of it ever again. But there will be the promise of the nanny state. We'll care for you. We'll take care of you. Bullshit. The trillions spent by government on educating everyone and leaving no child behind. The trillions more poured into socialist colleges and universities to ensure every successive generation is more socialist-minded than the one before it. The government subsidies for health care, including all that crap with COVID. Trillions more to pay for people to illegally enter the United States and remain here. At least hundreds of billions, likely trillions, spent on overseas transgender clinics and the murder of tens of millions of dark-skinned babies. You know, they're all concerned about dark-skinned here with the whole immigration deportation thing. But when it comes to those dark-skinned people on on the other side of another ocean somewhere, well, they don't give a crap. Trillions on foreign wars. The list of how they have taken your money in a socialist mindset and spent it on whatever they want, ripping you off, it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. In fact, to undo that century of decline, Trump has put in place countless policies and orders to begin to get grandma off the ventilator and breathing on her own again. Does that mean she's ready to get up and dance? No, but it stops the declines or stop the bleeding. Rome wasn't built in a day, and as anyone who has ever sat at the bedside of a critically ill loved one, they know new medicine often takes time to notice the effects, to have its impact. Yes, will millions of illegal aliens getting abused, by the way, with slave labor wages being deported back, will that have an impact on various industries? Well, of course it will. They should never have been doing those jobs to begin with. First, they're here illegally. Second, they get paid slave wages because greedy businesses want increased profits, which they get by not paying Americans an actual living wage for the same work. So unemployment stays somewhat constant. which makes a percentage of the population dependent on the government. And the greedy businesses take some of their profits and pump them into the coffers of corrupt politicians who vote to keep the status quo firmly in place, and the wheel goes round and round and round. Everyone wins except the normal middle-class American. That's why Trump is essentially the tip of the spear, kind of the leading edge, you could say, in the still nascent demolition of socialist America, which, remember, has been in the development stage for 100 years now. It was why they tried to kill him twice after fake trials and court proceedings failed. Trump and his administration is moving at breakneck speed, trying to detect and blow up every single landmine in the commies have put in place for the past century. But the problem is, even many in middle-class America have now grown sort of comfortable with those programs, those handouts, those freebies. What they're forgetting, though, is that the old middle-class American expression, there's no such thing as free. Coming to you from Houston, Texas, I'm Gary Michael Voris. God love you.